Hi everybody, good afternoon and happy Easter to everyone. I'm starting this week's update with a statement from Luke. Now, I've had lots of messages this week asking about Corinne's health. And Luke has asked me to say to people, Corinne is receiving treatment, but can you please respect their privacy at the moment? I won't be answering any private messages or making any further comment. That is the message from Luke. And please, as his supporters, please respect his request that everybody respect the privacy right now. Okay, on to news and updates. This one is, had to share this with you. Here we go. Look what was sent to me. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? I was going to wear it, but my camera stops here, so you wouldn't have seen it. But yeah, I have my t-shirt. Thanks, guys. So now then, let's have a look at some of the questions that have come up this week. I said it last week, I'm going to try and keep it brief. I really am. Easter Sunday. Now, one of the things that came up earlier in the week was a discussion about the police leaving Jodie's mum's house after the missing person report with wrong information. And the thing that became apparent, the thing that got me thinking about it was, so the police, according to Jodie's mum, were in Jodie's mum's house for no more than 5 minutes, taking the missing person details. But while they were there, one of the officers in his statement said there was Jodie's mum and a male that he took to be her partner. Why didn't he ask? Why didn't he check who he was? He just took to be her partner. But then when we move on and they've got this wrong information, they go to the wrong end of the path and they can't find Jodie, it transpires, and I hadn't thought about this before, it transpires they're not looking for Jodie, they're looking for Jodie and Luke. And one of the officers says in one of his statements, he says on the radio back to control, I think there's been a wee falling out. That's why he's galloping about at the back of the school. Now that indicates that he thought Jodie and Luke were together. When the information that his mum had, that Jodie's mum had, was that they hadn't been together because Jodie hadn't turned up. We then have the other curious anomaly of the other officer who believed that Jodie had left from her mum's house at tea time with her boyfriend. Now we know that's not the case. Where did he get that idea? And was it because of that the other officer then makes this comment about galloping about at the back of the woods? Because there's been a wee falling out. They'd have to be together for there to be a wee falling out. They'd have to be together at some point. So I just thought that was quite an interesting observation, that right from the off, these police were running with the assumption that Luke and Jodie had been together, when all of the information available to them was that they hadn't. So, the other thing that the police at the missing person report noted was that there was only 2 adults in the house when they came to take Jodie's details. And, well, according to all of their statements, there were 3 adults in the living room when the police arrived. There was Jodie's mum, her partner, and her brother. But the police only mentioned two, the girl's mother and this person that they took to be her partner. So straight away, before Jodie's even found, we have these anomalies already sneaking into the case, already influencing what these officers think and what they're presuming to have happened. I guess you can make of that what you will, but it does certainly explain at least some of the strange decisions by the police early on. Okay. The next thing that came up this week was there was a lot of discussion about the T-shirt and was it borrowed and how was it proven that it was borrowed. Well, the bottom line is it never was. It was never proven that it was borrowed. Right up to trial, Jodie's sister and her boyfriend were saying things like it could have been borrowed without permission, without her sister knowing about it, all of that sort of thing. And somebody asked, well, you know, how did it become evidence, reliable evidence, if there was nothing to prove that it was true? And unfortunately, when you look at this case, there is so much that was allowed as evidence, accepted as evidence, when there was nothing to prove that it was actually true. So, for example, the time of Jodie leaving makes no sense. It changed in the first week, and we know that it went from 5:30 to just after 5 to 10 to 5. And the only thing we have that would corroborate any of them is the sighting by the two independent witnesses of a girl that they thought was Jodie at 5:05 walking down East Houses Road. And that time wasn't used. So again, we have this information with nothing to back it up. Another one is the time the search trio left from the Grand's house. What evidence do we have? What proof do we have that that time was correct? The only thing I guess that we have is the fact that it can't be right. Because if they left at 6 minutes past 11, which is when the last phone call to either the granny or the sister in the granny's house ended, they then said they got torches, they gathered up torches. The gran was ready for bed, so she had to get dressed and then set off. They then needed a 20-minute window to walk from the gran's house to where they were standing at the top of the path waiting for Luke. So that takes you to at least 26 minutes past 11. Not allowing for torches and getting dressed and everything else. 26 minutes past 11. So 9 minutes approximately before Jodie was found. In that 9 minutes, they've got to get all the way down from the top of the path to the viewpoint, Luke to double back and go over the wall, Stephen Kelly to be shouted back and come running back and also go over the wall, and then help the granny over the wall. 9 minutes for all of that. So there's never really been an explanation for how they were at the top of the path before Luke, because we know what time Luke set off, and we've got him pinpointed through various phone calls at different places on the path. So the only thing we really have is if they left at the time they said they left, they couldn't have been at the top of the path before Luke. But again, that information about when they left and where they left from was accepted at face value, with the exception of the appeal court judges who said in their judgment at the end of the appeal that the search trio left from her mother's house, just a few minutes walk from the end of the path. That might have been a mistake. Certainly on the basis of the evidence, it was a huge mistake, but it would account for them getting to the top of the path within a couple of minutes. But the point here is that there was so much information that was allowed as evidence that had nothing to back it up, or that had so much information that refuted it. Next, oh yes, so lots of you have been writing to your MPs and getting these standard letters back saying there's nothing we can do, government can't get involved in the justice system, and he's got the SCCRC and all of that. And most of them have this line at the end that says, Mr. Mitchell may wish to seek independent legal advice. There are no live proceedings in this case. So there's no legal aid funding available in this case. How do they propose Mr. Mitchell seeks independent legal advice with no money to pay for it? It just shows that the ignorance of how the system works, even amongst our politicians. They have no idea how it works. Oh, he'll get legal aid for that. No, he won't. No, he won't. There's no live proceedings. It's finished for now. So there would be no legal aid to allow them to seek independent legal advice. But it's about educating people about how the system works, and that is an important point. I came across this maybe Thursday, and it was a quote from the senior investigating officer, Craig Dobby, way back in the day, when he was talking about what made them suspect Luke so early, in a newspaper quote. And he said what made them suspicious was that Luke was the last person to see Jodie alive and the first person to find her dead. When the information they have is that her mum, her stepdad, and her brother were the last people to see her alive, or alternatively, Andrina Bryson was the last person to see her alive, or alternatively, the two independent witnesses who saw the girl at 5:05 were the last people to see her alive. So how did Mr. Dobby come to the conclusion that Luke was the last person to see her alive? And that ties right back in to the two officers at the beginning, the one that said he thought there'd been a little falling out and that's why he was galloping about at the back of the school. But all of the information they had, all of it, made it clear Luke was not the last person to see her alive because he didn't see her that evening. So it looks to me like right from the off, they were discounting anything that removed Luke from being with Jodie or seeing Jodie, and just running with all this made up nonsense to put them together, to put the two of them together. It just, honestly, it makes no sense. But I suppose amongst all the hysteria and all the media hype and everything, little details like that got lost. And it's only when you look back at them later and you go, oh, wait, that means they were already pushing that narrative. Right from the very, very beginning, before Jodie was even found. Sorry. If Corinne is 100% sure he's innocent, why not sell her piece of land? She doesn't have a piece of land to sell. The land is not hers. I've explained this before. A really, really interesting question that someone came up with. And the question was, the store where Andrina Bryson did her shopping, was there ever any CCTV footage recovered from there? Now, bear in mind all the problems with her timings and then the change in the time from the till receipt and the bank statements and all of this to squeeze her sighting into this window that would fit with the narrative that it could have been Luke that she saw at the end of the path. To my knowledge, there was never any CCTV footage recovered from that store. Now, they took CCTV footage from the garage next to the petrol station, next to Corinne's workplace. They took CCTV footage from a little corner shop in Newton Grange, but not from a national chain. Again, it just beggars belief. Why not? Why rely on till receipts and bank statements and all of this nonsense when they could have just gone, can we have a look at your CCTV footage, please? But apparently, they didn't do that. Now, I have some questions that were missed from last week, and I'll do these, and then because I can't follow this, one of our great supporters again is taking your questions and will email them to me. So one of the questions last week was, did Jodie accuse Mr. Dickey Sr. of anything? To my knowledge, no, Jodie didn't. This question arises because Mr. Dickey Sr. himself told a newspaper that the police had come to him and accused him of some sort of impropriety with Jodie. And he'd been so disgusted, apparently put them out of his house. Why would he say that? Is the first question. Jodie clearly was already dead by that stage, so she couldn't have said anything. And why did Mr. Dickey Sr. decide later to put this in the public domain? I don't know, but he did. There you go. When Jodie was out to 2 a.m. the previous week, where was she? I don't think it was the previous week. I think it was a couple of weeks before. Can't remember the exact time now. She was at her cousin Yvonne's, where she was supposed to have been banned from going there a couple of weeks earlier by her mum, but on this particular night, that's where she was. Are there recordings of the 999 calls from Luke and Stephen? There are, but I've never heard them. All I have are the transcripts. Again, it's one of those things that we only have access to what we have access to. And the transcript is pretty comprehensive, in fairness. So they do note that there's female voices in the background. They do note that, you know, he's getting agitated and telling them they have to come quickly and all of that. So we don't have the actual recordings. They do exist, but we don't have them. But we do have the transcripts. Now, back to the borrowed T-shirt. Are they claiming Jodie borrowed an unwashed T-shirt from her sister? And why was Kelly's DNA on the T-shirt, but Janine's wasn't? No, they're not claiming. They're not claiming that an unwashed T-shirt was borrowed. They're claiming that a washed T-shirt was borrowed. A clean, freshly laundered T-shirt was borrowed. Why was his DNA on the T-shirt, but Janine's wasn't? They said the DNA had transferred onto the T-shirt in a washing machine cycle. I don't have any explanation for why Janine's DNA wasn't also on it, unless the wash cycle washed off Janine's DNA and left her boyfriend's there. I can't explain it because it makes no sense, and it's never made any sense. Why are some witnesses kept out of the public domain and not others? Essentially, legal requirements. So people who were publicly named in connection with the case and their actions or their accounts or whatever are in the public domain, we can talk about them because they're already in the public domain. Excuse me, and that's what the law allows. People who were not named or people who were never connected to the case, or there are a few other reasons that I can't say for legal reasons. So there are a number of things that prevent me from talking about certain individuals, and that's just the way the law works. I don't make the rules, but I do have to abide by the vast majority of them when it comes to this stuff. So that's the explanation. I'm sorry it's incomplete. It has to be, because some of the information I just can't give out. Okay, do we know yet where Jodie got the cannabis that day and where she smoked it? No. No, we don't. No information on that at all. How have you been treated, me, in communications with the police involving the case? I would say they're not best pleased at what I've been doing. The last few years, actually, I've had no issues with them at all, no problems with them at all. In the early years, and by the early years, I mean from probably up to 2010, 11. Well, the biggest shock for me was the realization that they wouldn't protect me, that people could come to my door and threaten me, and the police just laughed. They didn't care. The harassment, the constantly being stopped in the car, the constantly being questioned on really, really, really spurious grounds. Where have you been? Where are you going? I'm in my car. What does it matter where I've been or where I'm going? So yeah, in the early days, it was initially it was frightening. I'd never been. I think I'd been stopped once by the police, potentially for speeding. My daughter was still in hospital, and I was running back and forward, and I got pulled. But I wasn't actually speeding, as in criminal offence speeding. So I'd never really been involved with being stopped by the police or being questioned by the police. And then all of a sudden, virtually every time I'm out in the car, any distance away from home, I'm being followed and being stopped and being pulled over and being questioned. So this I know now that just goes with the territory of this work, and it has been so much better in recent years, and I have to hand that to them, that I have not had any bother at all in recent years. But yes, it wasn't great in the early days. How can we get it re-examined if no new evidence comes forward? Is there a way at all? There are some legal routes which I have been investigating and will be continuing to investigate with legal experts over the next few weeks. One of the difficulties is making sure that every box is ticked, because if even one isn't ticked, that route is not available to us. So until I've checked them all out, and until I know what we might be able to go forward with and what we definitely can't go forward with, I can't really update any more than that. Okay, now we had this conversation already, but I'm just going to cover it because it came up in some of the questions last week that I didn't get to. Will Luke be released after the full sentence is completed, even if he doesn't admit to killing Jodie? What happens after Luke's sentence is up? Luke's sentence was without limit of time. The 20 years was the minimum he had to serve, not the maximum. So without limit of time means exactly that. It means forever. And they can't even consider that he might be released until he's served that first 20 years. So if he doesn't say he's guilty, if he doesn't address his offending behaviour, his opportunity for parole will come up every year, and then it will go away again every year, because he has said himself he will not admit to something he didn't do. And that's the difficulty with these massive sentences, the full life sentences, is there's not an end date to them. The 20 years isn't the end date. That's just the absolute minimum they have to serve. Right, I have 2 more questions, and then we'll get the emailed questions that have come up today, and I'll have a look through them as well. Okay. Are any of the police officers who worked the case still employed now in the job? I don't know. Is the honest answer to that? I don't know. I would imagine some of them will be. I'd imagine many of them will have retired. But the honest answer is I don't know. Could Jodie walk up the other side of the wall rather than climb over? Yes, there's been quite a bit of discussion about this. I just actually discussed that on the Foul Play Live as well. Yes, there were several other ways Jodie could have got into that woodland strip without having to come down the path and go over the wall. And there was no forensic evidence on the wall from Jodie's clothing or anything like that to say she'd gone over the wall. And there was no forensic evidence from the wall on Jodie's clothing to say that she'd gone over the wall. So again, this story that she came down the path to the viewpoint and either climbed over voluntarily or was bundled over the wall, there's no evidence to back it up. And it's equally possible she'd come in to the woodland strip behind the wall from quite a number of other potential routes. So we're back to, where's the evidence that Jodie came down the path and went over the wall at the viewpoint? There is none. There is none. Okay, now that's last week's. Let me see what we have in the emails for this week. If you just give me a second till I check out the emails. Right, there's a few here that I can't answer, and I've explained why, so I'll just stick with the ones that I can. Was Robert Greens in the area that day? Yes. That afternoon, he was visiting a relative who lived quite close to the path. We found that information out much later. But yes, he was in that area, which is why we asked the police, did you check him out? And they wouldn't tell us. They wouldn't answer that question. So all we know is, yes, he was in the area. That afternoon, I think about 3:30, he arrived. And that's all the information we have, I'm afraid. Again, you'd think that's the sort of information that they would want to give out if they'd done it properly. Was it definitely the police who bleached the crime scene before the dogs came, and why did they bleach the area? Well, we have to assume it was the police that bleached the crime scene, because the whole area was still cordoned off, and the police investigation, the searching and the collecting evidence and everything was all still going on at that time. So had somebody else managed to get in with that level of police presence and bleach it right under the noses, there would be some serious questions. There's already some serious questions to be asked about why they bleached the scene before the dogs got there in the first place. But I think to take it to the next level and suggest that somebody other than the police got in at the height of the investigation to bleach the crime scene. I'm not saying it's impossible. In this case, I wouldn't say anything's impossible. But I think it's unlikely. Let's put it that way. I think it's unlikely. Why did they bleach the crime scene? Who knows? Who knows? They knew the dogs were coming. They asked for the dogs to be brought in and then bleached the scene before the dogs got there. And I suspect it was to ensure that the dogs only reacted in the direction of New Battle. So it then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We think it was Luke Mitchell and he escaped towards New Battle. Bleach the rest. Oh, look, the dogs can only go in one direction. Fortunately, the dog handlers did note in their reports that the bleach hampered the dog's ability to do the work. But the parameters that the dogs were to work in had already been decided before the dogs got there and the discovery that the scene had been bleached. The parameters had already been decided anyway, and the dogs were only going to check from the V point towards Newbattle. And again, you have to ask why. Mr. Dickey Sr. was over the wall, and he came back and walked along Lady Path, and it was discovered there was a substance that proved positive for blood on his boot. Those dogs could have gone along Lady Path and discovered other scents, other examples that had maybe gone further or that had turned into the school, which would have told you there were people there who'd been at the scene and who'd gone up towards these houses' end in various different directions. So why didn't they want the dogs to do that? I have no answers, at least not for those questions. Okay. Could the Frontline documentary be shown again to raise awareness? I have asked for permission to upload the Frontline documentary. I do have a copy of it, but I don't have copyright permission to put it out for people to see. I will ask again, especially on the back of Murder in a Small Town. I will ask again. If I get permission, obviously, I'll let everybody know and I will put it up there so that everybody can see the entire documentary. But for the minute, I don't have permission to do that. Similar questions. Why was Alan Evans not called to the stand? I don't know. How much would an independent review cost, and are we, the public, allowed to contribute to this? I have no idea how much it would cost. I meant to look up how much Hillsborough cost to see if there was any, the Hillsborough Independent Inquiry. I meant to look up that to see if there was any sort of idea of what something on that scale cost. In terms of could the public contribute towards it, the only way we will be able to do that is if we can get the information released to an independent panel in the first place. And that's the first hurdle. If we can get over that hurdle, then we can start looking at costs. Then we can start looking at if the public want to help, if they want to contribute, where the money's going to come from to pay for it. But we have to get over that first hurdle of getting an independent review in the first place, getting agreement for one. And that's where you guys are going to come in. That's where we're going to need your pressure to push for this, because these MPs' letters saying, oh, you can go back to the SCCRC, you can seek independent legal advice, they're missing the point, and it goes round in a circle. The SCCRC have to find new evidence. We want the information released to go to an independent panel to see if it is new evidence in the first place. So to say we can't have it, we've got to go and ask the Commission to ask for it, especially when you look at what they did with the previous application. Luke's was a circumstantial case. So the judge himself said lots of these pieces of evidence don't stand alone. They only get their strength when they're linked together. But when the Commission did their investigation, 2014, when they stated the reasons for not referring it back, they took each individual point and said, yeah, that was wrong, but on its own, it doesn't amount to miscarriage of justice. And that was wrong, but on its own, it doesn't amount to miscarriage of justice, and so on and so on. But they didn't do what they did with the original case and put them all together and say, and the strength of all of these together suggests there's been a miscarriage of justice. They didn't do that. So how do we trust them if we go back a second time? How do we trust them not to do the same thing again? And that's why I said an independent inquiry, because we can't keep going round in this closed circle. We can't keep doing that. Not just for Luke's case, incidentally, but for justice for all of us and for all of the cases that get caught in this loop as well. That needs to change. And that's why I'm pushing so hard for an independent inquiry. Okay, what else do we have? Why did the police suspect Luke in the first place? So this is the last one from this batch, and I'll just yeah, we've got a second set here. Why did the police suspect Luke in the first place? I think because they ran off with all the wrong information right from the off. And by the time they realised it was wrong information, and by the time the DNA came back and there was none of Luke's there, it was too late. But I do think when you look at, you know, the guy that said he thought there'd been a wee falling out, and the one that said that Jodie left with her boyfriend at tea time, left from her mum's house with her boyfriend at tea time, and now the boyfriend was saying he hadn't seen her. I think when you look at that circumstance, it does sound a bit suspicious. Like, what? He left her at tea time, but he's saying he hasn't seen her. So, yeah, was that the reason? Possibly, because they were basing it all on wrong information from the off. And when you start perceiving something from a particular standpoint, then the tendency to look for things that support it, especially in fast-moving circumstances like that. Oh, he's saying he hasn't seen it, and he's coming up the path on his bike, and now he's jumped over a wall and he's found the body all by himself. That was their line of thinking, even though it was based on nothing factual. Okay, next set of questions. Could any of the female DNA be Janine's? Well, yeah. Now let me qualify that. Siblings, sisters, will have several parts of the DNA profiles that are the same. And there were so many results in the forensic reports that were only partial profiles. And one of them had one marker, and every single one of them was labelled Jodie Jones. Some of them could have been Janine. And it could have been that some of the DNA on the t-shirt was Janine's in those partial profiles, because unless it's a full profile, you can't say whose it was. But the fact that they didn't say, for example, as they did in some of the other profiles, Jodie Jones or Janine Jones, because the markers that were available would have been the same, they only said Jodie Jones. And again, it's this really sloppy labelling and jumping to conclusions. But we don't have any full DNA profiles from Janine on any of the clothing or anywhere, basically. Excuse me. Was any substance found on Jodie's clothing, and was any paraphernalia found in her home? Again, to my knowledge, there was nothing found in Jodie's bedroom. I presume we're talking about smoking paraphernalia here, that would account for the joint that Jodie had before she died. To my knowledge, there was nothing, no smoking paraphernalia, no papers, no lighters, no tobacco, nothing found in her room. There would obviously be smoking paraphernalia in the house generally, because their mum smoked cigarettes, and we know there was cannabis being smoked, so there would have been smoking paraphernalia in the house. But if you mean connected directly to Jodie, in Jodie's room, no. Sorry, what was the question? Was any substance found on Jodie's clothing? I don't know what you mean by substance. Do you mean, if you mean cannabis? No, there wasn't. There were white stains. There were stains believed to be saliva, unidentified white stains believed to be saliva, various bits and pieces on her clothing that were never identified. They were never, we don't know what they are. We don't know if the saliva was human or animal, and if it was human, who it came from. We didn't get, when the results came back, most of them were just no reportable result. That's what we're dealing with, unfortunately. Now then, what else do we have here? Because we're getting close to calling it a day here. There were 2 separate calls reporting Jodie missing. Why was the first call not looked at, seeing as the call was made before Judy told Luke she was calling the police? Yes. I have no idea why that initial call reporting Jodie missing kind of disappeared into the ether. It's in the files. It's in the files, and the details given in that report suggest it had to be somebody very close to Jodie's family that made that call. They were able to give names, dates of birth, maiden names, the grand's details, all of that. So that was, from memory, that was 11:15 that call was made. At a time where Judy had just come off the phone to Luke and was calling Jodie's gran. So she wouldn't actually know that Jodie was missing, because she could have phoned Luke and Luke said, I haven't seen her, and then phoned the gran, and the gran said, oh, she's been here all night. So until the conversation with the gran ended, there could have been no way of knowing that Jodie was missing. And even at that point, it would have been too quick a conclusion, because just because she hadn't seen Luke, and just because she wasn't at the gran's, didn't mean she might not be at her cousin's, or she might not be at another friend's house. But before any of that was checked, this call reporting Jodie missing was made and is recorded in the files. I don't know why it was buried, and the later call at 11:05 was the one taken to be the one reporting Jodie missing. I don't know why that is. And I've never been able to get any further information on it to try to track that one down. Where are we? The unknown man who chased 2 pupils attending a concert. I have had no confirmation of that story whatsoever, and as you know by now, I don't comment on unverified. I've seen a few things on social media, but I've had no confirmation of that. So until I do, I can't make any comment on that at all. Is it possible the scene was bleached before the body was found? Possible, I suppose. Unlikely though, because they were found. Oh, I see what you mean. But then you would imagine that the blood stains on the branches and things like that would have shown traces of bleach when they were tested. So I guess I keep saying anything's possible. I wouldn't think so. But let's leave it open as a possibility. I think, had that been the case, things like Jodie's clothing would have picked up traces of bleach as well. Her body would have picked up traces of bleach as well, had it been bleached before Jodie was killed. What types of dogs were used? And were trauma dogs ever at the scene, as there are different kinds of police dogs? Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I know the Yorkshire dogs, I believe from memory, were spaniels. I can't remember what the other dogs were. And trauma dogs, no, I believe it was only the trackers or sniffers that were brought in, and the whole point to them being there was to see if they could ascertain the direction that the killer escaped in. Now, I think we are just about done here. It's 45 minutes. Do I have any more questions? I think we're... Are there any interesting changes in behaviour or known conflicts with Jodie from any persons in her life in the 24-hour period leading to her murder? I can't talk about the 24-hour period prior to. We know there were changes of behaviour and appearance afterwards, and again, the idea that they were challenged at trial and the explanations given were quite ludicrous. But I can't comment on the 24 hours beforehand. Yeah, we're still on the t-shirt. I think I'm going to call it at that today. It's been a long day, and 2 lives, one after the other, is quite tiring. So I'm going to call it at that today. And once again, thanks to everybody for everything you're doing. It's absolutely amazing. I may take some time off next week just to sit back and take stock and process some of what's going on, because there's a lot still to be worked out. But for now, I'm going to say enjoy the rest of your Easter Sunday. Don't eat too much chocolate. I'm not having any. And I'll see you all next week. Same place, same time. Thanks again. Bye-bye. Bye.